morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines this morning. The chief economic advisor to the U.S. President Donald Trump, Larry Kudlow, has said that trade talks between the U.S. and China will resume this week, with officials from both sides engaging in conversations over the phone. The new India government will table its first economic survey in Parliament today. The government has approved the hike in minimum support prices of all Kharif crops amid a slow start to the monsoon and sowing this year. Deloitte Haskins & Sells, the auditors to McLeod Russell, has said that the tea company understated its losses worth over 1,822 crore rupees as it did not make provisions for advances to promoters. And IndusInd Bank will consolidate its merger with Bharat Financial effective today. The merged entity is likely to have an additional customer base of 2 crore. Let's talk about the U.S. markets now. It was a positive day of trade for the U.S. markets. The Dow Jones scaled a new record high for the first time since October. Trading remained thin, though, as the markets had a truncated session ahead of the Independence Day holiday today. Renita Young of Bloomberg News tells you what happened in that shortened trading session on Wall Street in this report.
U.S. stocks ended higher on Wednesday, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average seeing its first record since October, all happening in pretty thin trading during an abbreviated trading session one day before the U.S. Independence Day holiday, which will shut markets. Now, investors are still weighing the prospect of more dovish appointees to two of the world's most powerful and major central banks. But we also had more data come in on Wednesday that should give a little bit more assurance, or really a better view of how the U.S. economy is doing. We saw that jobless claims came in broadly as forecast. However, private hiring actually missed analyst expectations, and a U.S. services gauge dropped to its lowest since 2017. And we saw that the U.S. trade gap actually widened by more than forecast to the highest in 2019. And we know that June's government jobs data will be coming out on Friday. Meanwhile, we did see at least one stock to watch during Wednesday's trading session, and that was Boeing, which is offering $100 million to support the families of victims and others affected by the MAX 737-8 crashes that happened months ago. And that money is expected to go toward education, hardship, and living expenses for those impacted families. Now, a quick reminder that we will not be trading on, or markets will not be trading on Thursday, so we will be back on Friday. And that's a look at your Wednesday Wall Street action in New York. I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
All right, let's take a look at the Asian markets now. Rosalind Chin is joining us from the Bloomberg studios in Hong Kong. Morning, Rosalind. No cues expected at the end of the week from the U.S. markets. How are we looking in Asia, though?
Yes, Asia here, following Wall Street higher. We've got the MSCI Asia Pacific Index up by about almost half of 1%. Most of the region's major markets making gains this morning. Japan looks like it's set to regain most of the losses made on Wednesday. We've got the Topics up by half of 1%, the Nikkei up by 0.4%, almost. Now we've got the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe earlier strengthening the view that the Bank of Japan is not really under any pressure from the government to take extra action to achieve an inflation target. Now, we've got campaigning beginning on Thursday, that's today, in Japan for an upper house election in Japan that could actually determine the Prime Minister's chances of achieving his long-held ambition of changing the pacifist constitution. Also, of course, key for enacting any more changes to the sort of economy and domestic sort of view that will be coming after this election. So really, today, not that much going on, because there, of course, it's going to be the 4th of July holiday in the US, but there are, of course, going to be some key campaigning going on in Japan, and that may affect, not hugely, but it may affect the markets there. We're looking at China now. The Hang Seng Index up by 0.25%, Shanghai Composite and the CSI 300 also making gains this morning. We've some sources that China may be considering buying some US agricultural products as a gesture of goodwill because of the trade talks resuming with the US, although they're saying that the volume is likely to be a little bit smaller than before. In Hong Kong, of course, we've got the Hang Seng up by 0.2%. We've got Tencent, Ping An among the big hitters there, leading the gains in the Hong Kong market. And finally, Australia, trade data, of course, soaring to a record in May. That, of course, is boosting the Aussie exports, jumping 4%. The Aussie dollar right now, I'm just trying to find it on my chart here, it's at 70.37. And, of course, as I mentioned, the 4th of July holiday in the US, meaning some of the volume is pretty thin in some parts. Investors looking ahead to the non-farm payrolls for the month of June, which is out on Friday. Expectations are to show a rebound with a rise of 164,000 for the month of June. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Rosalind. All right, after a much-awaited meeting between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Osaka last week, officials from both sides will resume talks in the coming week. That's the word coming in from the chief economic advisor to the White House, Larry Kudlow. On the other hand, the US Commerce Department has imposed additional duties on steel being imported from Asian countries, including China. Jody Schneider of Bloomberg News brings you more.
You could have the trade truce on one hand, President Trump saying he's not going to impose additional duties on China right now while they talk, but at the same time, the Commerce Department is coming up with these duties. How that works is this is the usual process. They go case by case, and obviously President Trump has imposed unilateral duties on China, on Chinese goods, but also on steel. So here, what the Commerce Department is saying is that there have been unfair trading practices involving, in this case, steel wheels, and therefore it is opposing those additional duties. It's saying what has happened is that some goods are sent to other countries, and then to try to avoid these anti-dumping kinds of duties. We saw the other day that Vietnam, very large increases in tariffs were imposed on Vietnam, as the administration was saying what's happening there is that they were taking goods from other places, China and other places.
And they were always seen as a beneficiary of this trade.
Right, and that they were then going to try to get around the tariffs and then send them to the U.S. So while we're seeing these negotiations with China go on the trade matters, at the same time, there's these additional duties, and it just shows how the U.S. is operating on a number of fronts with tariffs.
And Jody, it does seem like those talks between the US and China have started or will start imminently. Let's take a listen to Peter Navarro, of course, a trade advisor and a China hawk, speaking to Bloomberg.
As we speak, plans are being made to re-engage with the Chinese, both in China and here in the United States. So what we prefer to do always is negotiate behind closed doors in good faith.
So, Jody, do we know what China is considering, what they could put on the table to move some kind of deal forward?
Well, the administration says that talks have already begun and will continue. We heard that from Larry Kudlow, the president's chief economic advisor. We've heard from people familiar with the situation who spoke to Bloomberg that there are plans or considerations by the Chinese to buy more agricultural goods from the U.S., like soybeans, corn, pork. And of course, the administration has wanted this to happen as part of the negotiations. They want to see that trade gap with China narrowed significantly. How much China will buy, it apparently depends on the progress of the negotiations and is not thought to be as much as they had agreed to during earlier rounds of talks, which ended May 1st when President Trump said that China was reneging on its promises. Now, with the agreement at the G20 and the agreement by the Trump administration not to impose more duties on China at this point, it looks like Chinese are saying we will consider buying some more goods. So another perhaps sweetener in the talks as they progress.
All right, let's turn back to India now. Agam Vakil is here to tell you all about the day's trade and what's happening in the futures and options space. Good morning, Agam. Budget tomorrow. Well, a little confused right now, right? Because the interim budget was not really an interim budget. A lot of announcements came in. So not sure what's going to come in tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is there going to be caution ahead of the budget presentation?
Alex, you put it very well, because we are not certain as to now what remains to be announced in the budget. And I reckon that we'll see how the markets take that into their stride. For now, at least as far as the SGX Nifty is concerned, we're looking at some gains there, 11,959, 960. And as far as the Nifty is concerned, of course, we did see largely flattish moves. Some outperformance for the broader market indices like mid-cap and small-cap indices and Nifty Bank and Nifty PSU banking indices, which were advancing. But as far as your ADRs are concerned, Vedanta, Wipro, Infosys, all advancing. And as far as your other ADRs are concerned, marginal moves coming through. So not really much to speak for. But coming down to FIIs and DIIs, around 390 crores worth of selling came through. On the other hand, DIIs buying stock were 287, 288 crores. And again, because it was a flattish day of trade, we really didn't see too much happening on either side of the gainers or the losers. As you can see, IndusInd Bank and ITC's gains balancing out against Infosys and TCS. But moving on to your futures and options space, and this may be very interesting. The importance of the union budget has reduced to a certain extent over the previous few budgets, considering the GST has come through, and because of which we are not really seeing too much in terms of the build-up in open interest. In fact, unwinding. Sure, some might argue that traders are actually reducing their positions ahead of that address. But we'll wait and watch for how that happens. Very little happening as far as the Nifty Bank is concerned either. And as far as your open interest distribution is concerned, again, a 500-point range, not too much to speak for, is the same. In terms of changes in open interest, that may give you an idea that while we're seeing writing around the 11,700, 11,900 puts, this means that we do have a little bit of a support building into lower levels. But as far as your India VIX is concerned, this perhaps can be taken as a positive, especially given that ahead of a big event, the India VIX tends to spike, but in this case it's actually coming off. In fact, it's now below the mark of 14. This means clearly that the markets to a certain extent are factoring in, not too many uncertainties as far as the union budget is concerned. But moving on, your Nifty put call ratio is at 1.4 again against 1.46. And coming down to Diwan Housing Finance, which remains in the F&O ban, it did move up around 10%. Reliance Capital is the new stock in the F&O ban. As far as IGL and Mahanagar Gas are concerned, we are looking at a little bit more weakness. So there are more shorts into the system, and of course, Just Dial, we are watching out for that towards longs. And in terms of unwinding, stocks like Bank of Baroda, Torrent Power, ONGC standing out. But again, Alex, we're largely expecting some amount of consolidation once again, at least based on the cues we have so far.
All right, thanks so much for that, Agam. All right, let's have a look at what's making headlines across the globe. Selena Wang of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
The U.S. government is hitting back at Huawei's constitutional challenge to the U.S. sales ban. The Justice Department says the ban isn't legislative punishment, but protection against China gaining a foothold in federal agency networks. It's asked a federal judge to dismiss Huawei's suit against the government. Meanwhile, Huawei is suing a block, a law Congress passed last year that bars government purchases of its products. President Trump has lost a legal attempt to free up extra funding for his border wall. A federal appeals court maintained an earlier ruling barring the administration from proceeding with constructions using funds that had not been approved by Congress. Officials had asked for a permission to dip into $1 billion from the Defense Department. The president is expected to ask the Supreme Court to intervene. China is warning the UK to keep out of Hong Kong politics, accusing London of interference in the city's affairs. Beijing issued a strongly worded statement saying the territory, quote, is not what it used to be, and that the British government has chosen to stand on the wrong side. 13 people have been arrested in connection with the violent protests at the Legislative Council building on Monday. Early indicators for June show the Chinese economy under even more downward pressure following May's hike in U.S. tariffs. Business surveys suggest rising stress among small and medium-sized enterprises, with the government expected to offer more support. Bloomberg Intelligence says market sentiment improved toward the end of the month after the U.S. and China reached a trade truce at the G20. Global news 24 hours a day on air at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Selena Wang, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, now India needs to determine whether its economic slowdown is cyclical or structural. That's according to Jahangir Aziz of JP Morgan. Speaking to Ira Dugal ahead of the union budget, Aziz said that it is very difficult to determine whether India's slowdown in growth is temporary or not. Listen in.
We have questions about this actual growth rate, but if you set those that aside, it's performing reasonably well as far as other emerging market countries are concerned, particularly if you compare them to its current account deficit peers. So if you compare them to Brazil or to Turkey or to Argentina or to South Africa, Indonesia is doing reasonably well. So I think, there isn't a lot of, grave concern about India at this point in time. The question is, what does the government do and how does policy move from here onwards in order for India to move up and retain that high growth profile that it's promised to do so. I think a lot of this, at the current point, at the current juncture where, people are looking at current account deficit countries a little more generously is, of course, because of the Fed being on hold or actually even, promising to deliver rate cuts, and the ECB doing the same thing, and maybe even the BOJ will add to it sooner or later. So I think the global financial conditions are reasonably supportive at this time for current account deficit countries globally.
So then would you be on the side of the fence which says that, the government should perhaps retain its broad consolidation, fiscal consolidation path? In fact, within that, there are problems such as, the off-balance sheet borrowings, etc. Or would you be in the camp which says that, look, fiscal policy should be counter-cyclical, there's a growth slowdown, so perhaps there's reason for the government to loosen the fiscal purse strings?
Look, start with the second argument that India needs a counter-cyclical boost to growth. The question is the slowdown in India actually cyclical? I mean, if we haven't even determined that, why are we talking about cyclical slowdown in India? This could well be structural. Now, in order for us to be able to make that determination, whether India is cyclical, is it a cyclical slowdown or is it a structural slowdown, we actually need to, in the first place, have a sense of what a cycle in India is. Given the GDP data that we have, it's almost impossible to extract any kind of cyclical with any reasonable amount of certainty, or where India stands in the cycle. So I think this idea that this is a cyclical slowdown, there isn't data to determine one way or the other. But if you step back from just the growth numbers and you start looking at what exactly India has been doing over the, let's say, last 10 years, India has more or less tracked what has happened to global trade. So if you look at global trade, growth rate of global trade and growth rate of India, more or less it has tracked that. Except for brief periods, let's say 2013 to 14, when we went through the taper tantrum, and then in 2016 and 17 when India went through the impact of the demonetization and GST soon after. But by and large, India's growth rate has essentially followed like any other emerging market countries, maybe at a higher level, and it's essentially being determined by what's happened to global trade. So if global trade is something that is being pushed back by anti-globalization forces or by the maturity or the maturity of supply chain dynamics, and we don't really see global trade picking up, then it's very hard to say that what is happening to India right now is just a temporary slowdown, and a little bit of fiscal deficit, a little bit of demand boost can actually help the matter. In fact, I would argue, that India really needs to consolidate this budget right now. Public sector borrowing is, and I'm including the state and the center and state and central PSUs, is about 9.5% to 10% of GDP. That's a very large public sector borrowing that that the government and the bigger government is imposing on Indian households and financial markets.
All right, you'll find that entire conversation on the website bloombergquint.com. For now, let's turn to the other big story that came out last evening. The Union Cabinet yesterday increased the minimum support price of all Kharif crops for FY20, that's the current financial year. The Cabinet also approved decisions like tabling the Wage Code Bill. Nikunj Ohri is here to take you through the details.
The Union Cabinet has approved increase in MSP for Kharif crops in its effort to boost income of farmers. The MSP for paddy has been increased by 65 rupees as compared to the previous year and has now been hiked to 1815 rupees. The MSP for jawar, the new MSP for jawar is 2550 rupees, an increase of 120 rupees from the previous year. The MSP for tur and moong has been increased by 125 rupees and 75 rupees respectively. The Agriculture Minister, Mr. Narendra Singh Tomar, has also urged states to ensure that the farmer gets this new MSP that has been approved by the government. Besides this, the Cabinet has also approved tabling of arbitration bill, wage code bill and surrogacy bill, the details of which will be known once these bills are tabled in the ongoing parliament session. Over to you.
All right. Well, you have obviously presentation of the budget tomorrow. A lot of expectations as to what will be done to support farm income. But let's have a look as of now with what the Agricultural Minister Narendra Singh Tomar had to say about the MSP hike approval.
ऐसे लगभग लगातार इस मामले में बढ़ोतरी हो रही है और किसानों को अब ठीक प्रकार का मूल्य मिले, इसके लिए सरकार की प्रतिबद्धता है और उस प्रतिबद्धता पर सरकार पूरी ताकत के साथ काम कर रही है। खेती हम सब जानते हैं कि हमारे ग्रामीण अर्थव्यवस्था की मुख्य रीढ़ है और इसलिए कृषि के क्षेत्र में प्रधानमंत्री जी भी चिंतित हैं और पूरी सरकार इस प्रयत्न में लगी हुई है कि 2022 तक जो लक्ष्य प्रधानमंत्री जी ने तय किया है, विभिन्न आयामों पर काम करके उस लक्ष्य को प्राप्त किया जा सके। केंद्र सरकार की एजेंसियां भी, चाहे वो फूड कॉरपोरेशन ऑफ इंडिया हो, चाहे नेफेड हो, चाहे अन्य एजेंसियां हो, ये जब खरीद करती हैं तो राज्य सरकार के माध्यम से ही खरीद करती हैं और इसलिए राज्य सरकारों को थोड़ा सा अपने यहाँ पद्धति अच्छी से अच्छी बनाना चाहिए। आपको ध्यान होगा कि 2003 से पहले मध्य प्रदेश केंद्र को कुछ दे पाए तो केंद्रीय पूल में उसकी गिनती नहीं होती थी और जब राज्य सरकार ने खेती पर काम किया, सिंचाई पर काम किया, बिजली पर काम किया तो मध्य प्रदेश उत्पादन के क्षेत्र में बढ़ गया है और निश्चित रूप से जो खरीदने की व्यवस्था है वो मध्य प्रदेश में भी अच्छी है, लेकिन ये और अच्छी बनाते रहें जिससे कि किसान की फसल खरीदी जा सके और उसको अच्छा मूल्य मिल सके।
All right, on to news in the primary markets here in India. India's largest online B2B marketplace, India Mart Intermesh, will be listing on the bourses today. The 476 crore issue got a lot of interest and was subscribed 36 times. Samit Sarkar is here to take you through the listing possibilities and to tell you more about the company. Samit, we spoke a little bit around the time when subscription was open. A lot of interest in this company. What really are the numbers that you're looking at?
So I'll start off with the what the amount was raised and what is the issue price for the company. So they had raised close to 476 crore rupees it was in complete offer for sale, and that sold their shares at 973 rupees per share. That was the issue price, and the IPO had received a strong demand. As Alex mentioned, the total subscription number was close to 36 times, with most of the demand coming in from the HNI portion, which was subscribed nearly 62 times. The QIB portion was subscribed nearly 31 times, while the retail portion was subscribed close to 14 times, taking the total subscription demand to 36 times. And because of this strong subscription demand coming in for this company, the stock is also expected to open at a listing premium. Now the grey market premium for the stock is close to 150 rupees currently, which indicates a listing gain of nearly 15%. So let's see how the valuations would stack up on listing. Now at issue price of 973, the market capitalization of the company was close to 2,800 crore rupees. Is price to earnings, market capitalization to sales and EV to EBITDA was close to 140 times, 5.5 times and 25.7 times. Now if it lists at a premium of around around 100 rupees, then the market capitalization of the company would be close to 3,090 crore rupees. Price to earnings would be 154 times. Market cap to sales would be 6.1 times, and EV to EBITDA would be 29.2 times. And if it lists at a premium of 150 rupees, then the market capitalization of the company would cross 3,200 crore rupees. Its price to earnings would be 161 times. Market capitalization to sales would be 6.4 times, and EV to EBITDA would be close to 30.9 times. So what? Now let's see what the business of the company is. Now, the IndiaMart is India's largest B2B marketplace in India, and it has a market share of nearly 60% in the online B2B classified space. What it is an aggregator of suppliers and buyers in the wholesale ecosystem, and its revenue model is based on the subscription which it collects from the suppliers and who opt for paying and not from buyers. Now, if you see the key performance indicators for the company, now the number of registered buyers for the company has increased to nearly 83 million at the end of financial year 2019 from 27 million 3 years back, and the number of paying subscribers has increased to nearly 1,30,000 from 72,000 in financial year 2016. However, the number of paying suppliers as a percentage of the total suppliers for the company continue to remain low. On the financial side, if you see, the company's revenue has grown at a CAGR of nearly 30% over FY14 to FY19, but as you can see here, the company has turned operationally profitable only in financial year 2018.
All right. Somit, you just mentioned it's turned operationally profitable. What are the factors that aided that operational performance?
Well, it was the higher revenues and the stable costs that aided the company to turn operationally profitable in financial year 2018. Now, the revenue growth was aided on the back of the increase in number of paying suppliers. On the cost side, if you see, a decline in employee costs, customer costs, content development costs, and advertising costs aided the company to turn profitable. As you can see, in FY18, the employee cost came down to nearly 47.5% as a percentage of revenue, while the customer support cost was stable at close to 5.8%. Content development cost came down to 5.7%, and advertising cost came down to 0.8% as a percentage of revenue from 5.5% in financial year 2017. So this is what aided the company to turn profitable in FY18. Lastly, as the company generates nearly 1/3 of its revenue from subscription packs that are sold for nearly 3-year basis, deferred revenue is a good indicator to track the near-term revenue growth of the company. Now, if you see, in FY19, the company's deferred revenue or advances from customers stood at close to 586 crore rupees, which has increased from nearly 122.5 in FY14. So improving deferred revenue plus digitization trend would aid the company's growth going forward. That is what the management believes.
Thanks so much for that, Somit. All right, we'll have to see what the listing price is. Watch out for that new script on the blocks today. But for everything else that's likely to be buzzing in trade today, I'm joined by Mishika Parak, who's here to tell you all about the stocks in news. Morning, Mishika. What's on your list today?
Good morning, Alex. Lots of stocks are making news today. IndusInd Bank will consolidate Bharat Financial with itself as of today. The merger will boost the bank's customer base by 2 crore and more than double its branch count. The combined entity will disclose its consolidated financials for the quarter ended June. Next on the list is Uniply Industries. Kuwait's Markup made an open offer for 26% of the voting share capital at 82 rupees per share, aggregating to 405.6 crore rupees. The offer price is at a premium of 29% to the current market price. Then we have a downgrade for McLeod Russell. ICRA downgraded the credit rating of long-term and short-term borrowings to default from B- and A4 for borrowings worth 1,031 crore rupees. Now the ratings continue to remain on issuer not cooperating category, and the rationale for the ratings downgrade was due to the recent delays in meeting debt obligations. Cox & Kings defaulted in the payment of interest on non-convertible debentures worth 7.2 crore rupees, which was due on June 30th. The principal amount of the NCD stood at 300 crore rupees, and the company has already defaulted twice with a cumulative default of 200 crore rupees. Last on the list is Mindtree. Nalanda India Fund reduced stake from 10.6% to 1.7% in the company, and the shares were tendered by Nalanda in the open offer.
All right, thanks so much for that, Mishika. Now, in the world of politics, Congress President Rahul Gandhi tweeted his 4-page resignation letter yesterday, taking full responsibility for the dismal result in the recent Lok Sabha election, which saw the Narendra Modi-led BJP return for a second term with an even greater majority. Here's a look at Rahul Gandhi's career in politics till now. All right, let's take you through some of the stories you'll find on the website bloombergquint.com. First up, India has moved a step closer to inviting bids for the purchase of 114 fighter jets, currently the world's largest deal being negotiated as the Modi government seeks to boost its capability in the armed forces. The deal, which is valued at more than $15 billion, has attracted initial offers from global defense majors, including Boeing, Lockheed Martin and Sweden's Saab. At least 85% of the production has to be in India, according to an initial document issued more than a year back. And all is not well in the fast-moving consumer goods space in India. Marico and Godrej Consumer Products informed the exchanges yesterday that demand for their products has remained sluggish in the quarter ended June. That's an extension of the trend that has been seen last month when volumes of India's 4 largest consumer goods makers grew at the slowest pace in 7 quarters. That's all you need to know going to trade today. Do stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up over the course of the day. This is Bloomberg Quint.